Jason Statham opened his eyes as the first rays of sunlight came through the curtains of his London apartment. It was 7 in the morning on a beautiful Saturday. The famous action star stretched his arms and took a deep breath. Today felt different somehow. He had no movie shoots scheduled and no meetings to attend. For once in his busy life, he could enjoy a simple morning like any ordinary person. Jason got out of bed and looked out the window. The streets of central London were starting to come alive. He could see people walking their dogs and joggers running along the sidewalks. The weather was perfect with clear blue skies and gentle sunshine warming the city. It was the kind of morning that made you want to be outside. After taking a quick shower, Jason put on his workout clothes. He chose a simple black tank top and gray shorts. Even though he was a famous movie star, he always preferred comfortable clothes when he was not working. Jason grabbed his gym bag and car keys but then stopped. The gym was only 15 minutes away on foot. Why not walk there and enjoy the beautiful morning? Jason left his apartment building and started walking down the quiet street. The neighborhood was peaceful and clean. Small shops lined both sides of the road. There was a bakery that smelled like fresh bread and a flower shop with colorful displays outside. Jason smiled as he watched an old man feeding pigeons on a bench. A young mother pushed her baby in a stroller while talking on her phone. Everything seemed normal and calm. The gym where Jason worked out was located near Regent's Park. It was not a fancy celebrity gym, but a simple local place where regular people came to exercise. Jason liked it because nobody bothered him there. The staff and other members treated him like any other person. He could focus on his workout without worrying about cameras or fans asking for photos. Jason spent 2 hours at the gym working hard on his fitness routine. He lifted weights, ran on the treadmill, and practiced some martial arts moves. Exercise had always been important to him, especially since he did most of his own stunts in movies. Staying in shape was not just about looking good on screen, but about being able to perform dangerous scenes safely. After his workout, Jason felt great. His muscles were tired, but he had that good feeling that comes after exercise. He changed back into his regular clothes, a black t-shirt and dark jeans. Jason preferred to dress simply when he was not acting. He did not want to draw attention to himself or look like he was trying too hard to be noticed. As Jason left the gym, he decided to walk home through the park instead of taking the direct route. The morning was too beautiful to waste. He walked slowly, enjoying the fresh air and watching the world wake up around him. Children were playing on swings while their parents sat on benches drinking coffee. Dog owners were out in large numbers letting their pets run and play. Jason found a bench near a small pond and sat down for a few minutes. He watched ducks swimming in the water and people feeding them breadcrumbs. A group of teenagers were playing football on the grass nearby. Their laughter and shouts filled the air with joy. Jason felt relaxed and happy. These simple moments of peace were rare in his busy life. After resting for 10 minutes, Jason continued his walk home. He passed a small coffee shop where the smell of fresh coffee beans mixed with the morning air. The owner was setting up tables outside and arranging colorful flowers in pots. Jason waved and the man smiled back. Even though they had never spoken before, they recognized each other from previous mornings. Jason turned onto a quieter street lined with old trees. The leaves provided shade from the morning sun. He could hear birds singing in the branches above him. A cat sat on a windowsill watching the world go by with lazy eyes. Everything was peaceful and perfect. As Jason walked, he had no idea that this calm morning was about to change dramatically. He was just a regular person enjoying the simple walk, completely unaware that in a few minutes he would find himself in a situation that would test everything he believed in. The peaceful street ahead held a surprise that would turn him from a movie action hero into a real-life defender of the innocent. The peaceful morning silence was suddenly shattered by the deep roar of motorcycle engines. Jason stopped walking and turned his head toward the sound. The noise was getting louder and louder, coming from the main road that connected to the quiet street where he was walking. At first it sounded like just one motorcycle, but then Jason realized there were several engines rumbling together. 5 large motorcycles came speeding around the corner onto the peaceful street. The bikes were big and black with chrome parts that gleamed in the morning sunlight. But these were not clean show bikes. They were dirty and covered with dust from long rides. The exhaust pipes were loud and made an aggressive sound that echoed off the buildings on both sides of the street. The men riding the motorcycles looked as rough as their bikes. They wore black leather jackets covered with patches and symbols. Their hair was long and wild, and most of them had thick beards that reached down to their chests. Dark sunglasses covered their eyes, even though the morning sun was not very bright. Heavy boots and torn jeans completed their intimidating appearance. The leader of the group was the biggest man Jason had ever seen. He must have weighed over 250 pounds, and his arms were completely covered with colorful tattoos. His jacket had more patches than the others, and a large skull design on the back. He rode in front of the group like he was leading an army into battle. The bikers did not seem to care about anyone else on the street. They rode fast and recklessly, weaving between parked cars without slowing down. A man walking his small dog had to jump onto the sidewalk to avoid being hit. The dog barked in fear as the motorcycles roared past just inches away. The owner looked angry and shocked but said nothing. An elderly woman who was crossing the street had to run to safety when the bikers came speeding toward her. She dropped her shopping bag and groceries, scattered across the road. Apples and oranges rolled under parked cars while milk spilled onto the asphalt. The woman stood on the sidewalk breathing heavily and shaking her head in disbelief. None of the bikers stopped to help or even looked back to see if she was okay. The group finally came to a stop right in the middle of the street. They turned off their engines, but the sudden silence felt almost as threatening as the noise had been. The bikers got off their motorcycles and stood around talking loudly and laughing. Their voices were rough, and they used words that made people walking by look uncomfortable and walk faster. Shop owners who had been setting up their morning displays started to close their doors. A cafe owner quickly pulled his outdoor tables and chairs inside. The flower shop lady gathered her colorful arrangements and disappeared into her store. Even though the bikers had not done anything, yet everyone seemed to sense trouble coming. Jason watched all of this from about 50 yards away. He had seen tough guys before, both in movies and in real life, but something about this group felt different. They were not just showing off or trying to look cool. There was something mean and dangerous in the way they moved and talked. The way they completely ignored the problems they had caused for innocent people showed they did not care about anyone but themselves. A young mother with a baby stroller changed direction when she saw the bikers. She walked quickly away, pushing her stroller faster than before. 2 teenage boys who had been skateboarding picked up their boards and went into a nearby shop. Even the birds seemed to sense the tension and flew away from the trees above the street. The bikers spread out across the street, making it impossible for cars to pass through. A taxi driver honked his horn, politely asking them to move, but they just laughed and ignored him. After waiting for a few minutes, the taxi driver gave up and turned around to find another route. The bikers had taken control of the street, and everyone knew it. Jason felt his muscles tense as he continued to watch the scene unfold. His instincts told him that this peaceful morning was about to become something very different. On a wooden bench outside a small coffee shop sat an elderly woman with her beloved dog. The woman was around 70 years old, with silver hair neatly tied in a bun and gentle wrinkles around her kind eyes. She wore a light blue cardigan and comfortable walking shoes. Her name was Margaret Thompson, but everyone in the neighborhood called her Mrs. Thompson. She had lived in this area for over 40 years and was known by many local shop owners and residents. Next to her feet lay her faithful companion, Buddy, a golden retriever who was now 12 years old. Buddy had been with Mrs. Thompson since he was just 8 weeks old. The dog was no longer the energetic puppy he once was, but he was still the most important thing in Mrs. Thompson's life. His once bright golden fur had faded to a lighter cream color, and white patches covered his muzzle, showing his age. Buddy was the perfect companion for an elderly lady. He was gentle and calm, never causing trouble for anyone. During their daily walks, people would often stop to pet him because he had such a friendly face. Children loved him especially because he would sit patiently while they hugged him and played with his soft ears. Buddy had never shown aggression toward any person or animal in his entire life. Mrs. Thompson had been widowed for 5 years. Her husband had passed away suddenly, and Buddy had been her constant source of comfort during the lonely days that followed. The dog seemed to understand when she was sad and would rest his head on her lap until she felt better. Their morning routine of walking to the coffee shop and sitting on the bench had become the highlight of both their days. On this particular morning, Mrs. Thompson had bought herself a small coffee and a biscuit for Buddy. The dog lay peacefully at her feet, occasionally lifting his head to watch people walk by. His tail would wag slowly when someone smiled at him. Mrs. Thompson gently stroked his head while sipping her coffee and enjoying the warm sunshine. The coffee shop owner, Mr. Patil, often came outside to chat with Mrs. Thompson. He had known her for many years and always saved the best spot on the bench for her and Buddy. Sometimes he would bring Buddy a bowl of fresh water or a small treat from his shop. The elderly woman and her dog had become like family to many people in the neighborhood. When the loud motorcycles first appeared on the street, Buddy lifted his head with concern. The sudden noise frightened him, and he moved closer to Mrs. Thompson's legs, seeking comfort. Mrs. Thompson felt her dog trembling slightly and placed a protective hand on his back. She had never seen motorcycles like these in their quiet neighborhood before. The bikers parked their motorcycles and began walking around the street. Mrs. Thompson hoped they would just leave quickly so she and Buddy could finish their peaceful morning coffee. She tried not to look at the rough men directly, but she could hear their loud voices and harsh laughter. Buddy seemed to sense the tension and pressed himself closer to the bench. One of the bikers noticed Mrs. Thompson and Buddy sitting on the bench. He pointed them out to his friends, and they all turned to look. Mrs. Thompson felt uncomfortable under their stares and tightened her grip on Buddy's leash. She whispered softly to her dog, telling him everything would be okay, even though she was starting to feel scared herself. The biggest biker, with all the tattoos, started walking toward the bench. His heavy boots made loud sounds on the pavement with each step. Mr. Thompson's heart began beating faster as he got closer. She could smell cigarettes and engine oil on his clothes. Buddy lifted his head and looked up at the approaching stranger with worried eyes. Mrs. Thompson wished she could take Buddy and leave, but the bikers were blocking the way back to her home. She felt trapped and helpless, sitting on the bench with her elderly dog, who could barely walk fast anymore. All she wanted was to protect Buddy, but she did not know what these dangerous men might do next. The leader of the bikers stopped right in front of Mrs. Thompson and Buddy. He was so big that his shadow covered both the elderly woman and her dog completely. Up close, Mrs. Thompson could see the angry expression on his face and the mean look in his eyes. The smell of alcohol mixed with sweat and motor oil was so strong it made her feel sick. Looking down at Buddy, the biker made a disgusted face and spat on the ground next to the bench. He turned to his friends who had gathered behind him and said in a loud voice that the dog was the ugliest thing he had ever seen. The other bikers laughed and started making cruel comments about Buddy's age and appearance. They called him names and said he looked like he should be put out of his misery. Mrs. Thompson felt anger rising in her chest despite her fear. Nobody talked about her beloved Buddy that way. She looked up at the big man and said in a shaky voice that her dog was not bothering anyone, and they should just leave them alone. Her words only made the bikers laugh harder. They seemed to think it was funny that an old woman was trying to stand up to them. Buddy could sense the danger around them. The old dog struggled to his feet and positioned himself between Mrs. Thompson and the threatening strangers. Even though he was scared and his legs were weak from age, Buddy tried to protect his owner. He did not bark or growl because that was not his nature, but he stood as tall as he could and looked up at the bikers with brave eyes. Without any warning, the leader suddenly lifted his heavy boot and kicked Buddy hard in his side. The poor dog let out a painful cry and fell sideways onto the pavement. Mrs. Thompson screamed and dropped her coffee cup, which shattered on the ground, spilling the hot liquid everywhere. She immediately knelt down beside Buddy, trying to see if he was badly hurt. The other bikers thought this was the funniest thing they had ever seen. They pointed at the hurt dog and laughed even louder. One of them said they should kick the old woman too just for fun. Another biker moved closer and kicked Buddy again, this time in his back leg. The dog whimpered in pain and tried to crawl under the bench to hide from his attackers. Mrs. Thompson was crying now as she tried to shield Buddy with her own body. She begged the bikers to stop hurting her dog. She told them Buddy was old and sick and could not defend himself. Her words fell on deaf ears as the cruel men seemed to enjoy causing pain to helpless creatures. They took turns kicking the defenseless animal while Mrs. Thompson sobbed and pleaded for mercy. People walking on the other side of the street could see what was happening, but everyone was too afraid to help. The bikers were big and violent, and nobody wanted to become their next target. Some people quickly walked away pretending they had not seen anything. Others stood frozen in shock, unable to believe that anyone could be so cruel to an innocent animal. A man in a business suit started to walk toward the bench, but when the bikers noticed him approaching, they stared at him with such threatening looks that he changed his mind and hurried away. A woman with a small child covered her daughter's eyes and rushed into the nearest shop. Everyone wanted to help Mrs. Thompson and Buddy, but nobody had the courage to face the dangerous gang. Mrs. Thompson felt completely helpless as she watched her beloved companion suffer. Buddy was now lying on his side, breathing heavily and whimpering softly. His gentle brown eyes looked up at his owner, as if asking why these bad men were hurting him. Mrs. Thompson stroked his head gently and whispered that everything would be okay, even though she did not believe her own words. The attack seemed to go on forever, and Mrs. Thompson began to fear that nobody would ever come to help them. Jason Statham had been watching everything unfold from across the street. At first, he thought maybe the bikers were just being loud and rude, but when he saw them approach Mr. Thompson and Buddy, he felt something was wrong. His years of training and experience had taught him to recognize dangerous situations quickly. The way the bikers moved and talked told him they were looking for trouble. When Jason saw the first kick land on the innocent dog, his entire body filled with anger. He had always loved animals, and the sight of grown men hurting a defenseless creature made his blood boil. Jason clenched his fists and took a deep breath, trying to control his emotions. He knew that acting out of pure anger could make the situation worse for everyone involved. Jason looked around to see if anyone else was going to help. He saw people watching from safe distances, but nobody was moving to stop the attack. A police officer was nowhere to be seen, and the bikers seemed to know they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. Jason realized that if he did not act soon, the poor dog might be seriously injured or even killed. The famous actor started walking quickly across the street toward the group of bikers. His mind was clear and focused, like it was when he performed dangerous stunts in his movies. But this was not a movie set with safety crews and rehearsed moves. This was real life, and real people were getting hurt. Jason knew he had to be smart about how he handled this situation. As he got closer, Jason could hear Mrs. Thompson crying and begging the bikers to stop. The sound of her desperate voice made him walk even faster. He could see Buddy lying on the ground, breathing heavily and looking confused and scared. The sight of the injured animal filled Jason with determination to put an end to this cruelty. The bikers were so focused on tormenting their victims that they did not notice Jason approaching. They continued laughing and making cruel jokes while Mrs. Thompson tried to protect her hurt dog. Jason was now only 20 feet away from the group, and still they had not seen him coming. He used this advantage to plan his next moves carefully. Jason thought about all the martial arts training he had done over the years. He remembered the countless hours spent learning how to defend himself and others. Those skills had been useful in movies, but now they might be needed to help real people in a real crisis. Jason felt ready for whatever was about to happen. When Jason was just 10 feet away from the bikers, one of them finally noticed him. The man looked confused to see someone walking directly toward their group. He tapped his leader on the shoulder and pointed at Jason, who was now close enough to see the details of their faces clearly. The laughter stopped as all 5 bikers turned to look at the approaching stranger. Jason stopped walking and stood perfectly still about 6 feet away from the group. He looked calm and confident even though his heart was beating fast. The bikers studied him carefully, trying to figure out who he was and why he was not afraid of them like everyone else on the street. They had no idea they were facing someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. Mrs. Thompson looked up through her tears and saw Jason standing there. She had no idea who he was, but she felt a tiny spark of hope that maybe someone was finally going to help her and Buddy. The old dog also seemed to sense that something was different. He lifted his head slightly and looked at the man who had appeared so suddenly. The street became very quiet as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Jason stood like a statue, ready to face whatever came his way. The leader of the bikers looked Jason up and down with a mean smile on his face. He saw a man in regular clothes who appeared to be alone and unarmed. The biker had dealt with many people who tried to act tough before, and he was confident this would be no different. He did not recognize Jason as the famous actor and thought he was just another ordinary person trying to play hero. Jason spoke in a calm but firm voice that carried clearly across the quiet street. He told the bikers they needed to stop hurting the dog and leave the elderly woman alone immediately. His words were simple and direct, with no fear or hesitation in his voice. The way he spoke showed he was completely serious about what he was saying. The bikers burst into loud laughter at Jason's request. They found it hilarious that someone would dare to tell them what to do. The leader pointed at Jason and asked his friends if they could believe this guy thought he could order them around. They made jokes about how Jason must think he was some kind of superhero coming to save the day. One of the smaller bikers stepped forward and tried to intimidate Jason by getting very close to his face. He used foul language and told Jason to mind his own business unless he wanted to end up hurt like the dog. But Jason did not move backward or show any sign of being afraid. He stood his ground and looked the biker directly in the eyes without blinking. The biker leader grew tired of the games and decided to end this confrontation quickly. He walked closer to Jason until they were almost touching. The big man used his size to try to make Jason feel small and powerless. He leaned down and spoke in a threatening whisper, telling Jason that he had 3 seconds to walk away or he would regret ever getting involved. Jason listened to the threat without changing his expression. When the biker finished talking, Jason replied in the same calm voice he had used before. He said that hurting innocent animals and elderly people was not acceptable and that the bikers needed to leave now. His refusal to back down surprised the bikers, who were used to people running away from them. The tension in the air was so thick you could almost touch it. People watching from nearby shops and across the street held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Mrs. Thompson continued to hold Buddy close to her chest while looking up at Jason with hope and fear mixed together in her eyes. The biker leader was getting angrier by the second. Nobody had ever stood up to him like this before, and he did not like the feeling. He told his gang that they were going to teach this stranger a lesson about messing with the wrong people. The other bikers moved to surround Jason, making it clear they were prepared to use violence. Jason remained perfectly calm even as the 5 large men formed a circle around him. He had been in similar situations many times while filming action scenes, but those had been choreographed fights with safety measures in place. This was real, and there were no stunt coordinators to make sure nobody got seriously hurt. Suddenly, one of the younger bikers squinted at Jason's face and whispered something to the man next to him. Recognition dawned in his eyes as he realized who they were confronting. He had seen Jason's movies and knew the actor did his own stunts and had martial arts training. The young biker tried to get his leader's attention to warn him, but the big man was too focused on intimidating Jason to listen. The moment of truth was approaching fast, and everyone on the street could feel it coming. The biker leader had lost all patience with Jason. He stepped even closer until their faces were only inches apart. The smell of cigarettes and alcohol on the big man's breath was overwhelming. He told Jason this was his last chance to walk away before things got really ugly. His voice was low and threatening, like a growling animal ready to attack. Jason looked directly into the biker's angry eyes without flinching. He had faced down many tough opponents in his movie career, but this felt different because real people were counting on him. He spoke quietly, but clearly telling the biker that he was not going anywhere until Mrs. Thompson and Buddy were safe. His calm response only made the biker leader more furious. The young biker, who had recognized Jason, was now frantically trying to get his leader's attention. He grabbed the big man's arm and whispered urgently that the stranger was not just any ordinary person. He explained that this was Jason Statham, the famous action movie star who knew how to fight for real. But the leader was too angry and proud to listen to warnings from his younger follower. Mrs. Thompson watched the confrontation with growing fear. She could see that violence was about to explode, and she was terrified that someone would get seriously hurt because of her and Buddy. The elderly woman felt guilty that this brave stranger was putting himself in danger to help them. She wanted to tell Jason to leave and save himself, but her voice was frozen with fear. Buddy had stopped whimpering and was now watching Jason with curious eyes. Animals have a special sense about people, and the old dog seemed to understand that this man was trying to help them. Despite his pain, Buddy lifted his head a little higher as if he was trying to show Jason that he was grateful for his protection. The other bikers were getting restless and wanted their leader to make a move. They had been standing around talking for too long and were eager to show this stranger what happened to people who interfered with their business. Two of them moved closer to Jason from behind, while the others spread out to block any escape routes. They were preparing to attack all at once. Jason sensed the movement around him without turning his head. His years of martial arts training had taught him to be aware of everything happening around him, even when facing forward. He could feel the bikers positioning themselves for an attack, and he prepared his body to respond quickly when the moment came. The leader finally decided he had talked enough. He told Jason that he had made a big mistake by getting involved, and now he was going to pay the price. The big man raised his right hand and formed it into a fist. He pulled his arm back, preparing to throw a powerful punch at Jason's face. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for and dreading at the same time. Time seemed to slow down as the biker's fist moved forward through the air toward Jason. The people watching from nearby held their breath, and Mrs. Thompson closed her eyes, not wanting to see the violence that was about to happen. The sound of the biker's heavy breathing and the creak of his leather jacket seemed incredibly loud in the tense silence. But Jason had been expecting this moment and was ready for it. All of his training and experience had prepared him for exactly this situation. As the punch came toward him, Jason moved with lightning speed and precision. The real fight was about to begin, and nobody could predict how it would end. Jason moved like lightning as the biker's fist came toward his face. Years of martial arts training and countless hours of stunt practice had made his reflexes faster than most people could even see. He ducked his head to the left while the punch flew harmlessly through the air, where his face had been just a split second before. The biker leader was so surprised by Jason's speed that he stumbled forward from his own momentum. Before the big man could recover his balance, Jason grabbed his extended arm and used a simple but effective martial arts move to flip him over his shoulder. The biker leader, who weighed over 250 pounds, sailed through the air and landed hard on his back on the pavement. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and he lay there gasping for breath, like a fish out of water. The other bikers stood frozen in shock for a moment, unable to believe that their powerful leader had been defeated so easily and quickly. Jason stood calmly over the fallen man and looked at the remaining 4 bikers with steady eyes. He was not even breathing hard from the brief encounter, and his clothes were still perfectly neat and clean. 2 of the younger bikers decided they did not want any part of this fight and started backing away slowly toward their motorcycles. They had seen enough action movies to know that Jason Statham was not someone they wanted to mess with. Their movements were careful and deliberate as they tried not to draw attention to themselves while escaping. But the 2 larger bikers were too proud to run away without at least trying to avenge their leader. They rushed at Jason from opposite sides, thinking they could overwhelm him with a 2-person attack. Jason had faced similar situations many times during his movie fight scenes, and he knew exactly how to handle multiple opponents at once. Jason grabbed the first attacker's wrist as he threw a punch and used the man's own force to spin him around and send him crashing into a parked car. The second biker tried to grab Jason from behind, but Jason ducked low and swept his leg, knocking the man's feet out from under him. The biker fell backward and hit his head on the sidewalk, making a loud thudding sound. The fight was over almost as quickly as it had begun. 3 of the bikers were lying on the ground groaning in pain, while the other 2 stood by their motorcycles looking terrified. Jason had not thrown a single aggressive punch. He had simply used the attacker's own movements against them, with perfectly timed defensive moves. The biker leader struggled to sit up, holding his back where he had hit the pavement. He looked up at Jason with a mixture of pain and amazement in his eyes. For the first time, he realized who he had been trying to fight. He recognized Jason's face from movie posters and billboards around the city. The big man felt foolish for not listening to his friend's warning earlier. People who had been watching from safe distances began to come closer now that the danger was over. They started clapping and cheering for Jason, who had single-handedly stopped the bullies from hurting more innocent people. Some people took out their phones to record videos of the aftermath, while others called for police and medical help. Jason ignored the attention and immediately went to check on Mrs. Thompson and Buddy. The elderly woman was still sitting on the bench holding her injured dog and looking amazed at what had just happened. She could not believe that this stranger had risked his own safety to protect them from the dangerous bikers. The defeated bikers helped each other get to their motorcycles. They were embarrassed and angry, but they knew they had been beaten fairly. As they rode away from the scene, they shouted threats and curses, but everyone could see they were actually scared and would not be coming back anytime soon. Jason walked slowly toward the bench where Mrs. Thompson was still sitting with Buddy in her arms. The elderly woman was crying, but now her tears were from relief and gratitude rather than fear. She looked up at Jason with amazement in her eyes, unable to fully believe what had just happened. This stranger had appeared out of nowhere and saved them from those terrible men who had hurt her beloved dog. Jason knelt down beside the bench and gently reached out to pet Buddy. The old dog looked up at him with grateful eyes, and his tail wagged weakly despite the pain he was feeling. Jason spoke softly to Mrs. Thompson, asking if she was hurt and telling her that everything was going to be okay now. His voice was kind and reassuring, completely different from the tough fighter he had been just moments before. Mrs. Thompson managed to find her voice and thanked Jason over and over again. She told him that she had never seen anything so brave in her entire life. Through her tears, she explained that Buddy was all she had left in the world, and she did not know what she would have done if those men had seriously injured him. Jason listened patiently and told her that he was just glad he had been there to help. People from the neighborhood began gathering around them. Shop owners came out of their stores and pedestrians stopped to see if everyone was all right. Many of them recognized Jason now that they could see his face clearly. Word spread quickly through the small crowd that the famous action star had just stopped a group of bullies from hurting an innocent woman and her dog. A young man with his phone out had recorded the entire fight from across the street. He showed the video to his friends, and within minutes people were sharing it on social media. The footage showed clearly how Jason had defended himself and protected the helpless victims without using unnecessary violence. The video would soon spread across the internet, making Jason a real-life hero to millions of people. Jason carefully examined Buddy to see how badly the dog was hurt. He had some experience with animal injuries from working with trained animals on movie sets. The dog seemed to have bruises and was moving slowly, but Jason did not think anything was broken. Still, he insisted that Buddy should see a veterinarian right away to make sure there were no serious internal injuries. Mr. Thompson did not have a car and lived several blocks away. Jason immediately offered to drive them to the nearest animal hospital in his car, which was parked just down the street. He helped the elderly woman stand up and gently lifted Buddy in his arms. The dog was heavier than he looked, but Jason carried him easily to his car and placed him carefully in the back seat. During the drive to the veterinary clinic, Mrs. Thompson learned that her rescuer was the famous Jason Statham. She had heard of him, but had never seen his movies because she did not like action films. Jason laughed and told her that was perfectly fine, because he enjoyed meeting people who knew him as a person rather than just as an actor. At the animal hospital, the veterinarian examined Buddy thoroughly and confirmed that while the dog had some painful bruises, he would recover completely with rest and care. Jason paid for all of Buddy's medical treatment, despite Mrs. Thompson's protests. He also gave her his phone number and told her to call him if she ever needed help with anything. The story of Jason's heroic actions spread quickly through news outlets and social media. People praised him not just for being a talented actor, but for being a decent human being who stood up for those who could not defend themselves. Jason became known as a real-life action hero, and his reputation grew even stronger than before. Mrs. Thompson and Buddy returned to their peaceful morning routine at the coffee shop, but now they had a special guardian angel watching over them whenever Jason was in the neighborhood.